Good afternoon. It is Tuesday, September 20th, 2022. Occasionally I run into someone that wants to tell me how they don't need to be with other Christians in order to worship God. And they're surprised when I agree with them and say it's very true. Some of your very best worship experiences are in the privacy of your own prayer closet. But what they miss out on is that one of the benefits of gathering with other Christians and learning and discussing together is that when you do, your belief structure is strengthened, corrected if necessary, and affirmed if correct. The Apostle Paul relates the next major milestone in his story in Galatians chapter 2, verses 1 to 10. And I'll be reading from the New Living Translation, second edition. Paul says, "Then 14 years later, I went back to Jerusalem again, this time with Barnabas, and Titus came along too. I went there because God revealed to me that I should go. While I was there, I met privately with those considered to be leaders of the church and shared with them the message that I'd been preaching to the Gentiles. I wanted to make sure that we were in agreement, for fear that all my efforts had been wasted and I was running the race for nothing. And they supported me and did not even demand that my companion Titus be circumcised, though he was a Gentile. Even that question came up only because of some so-called believers. There are false ones, really, who were secretly brought in. They sneaked in to spy on us and take away the freedom we have in Christ. They wanted to enslave us and force us to follow their Jewish regulations. But we refused to give in to them for a single moment. We wanted to preserve the truth of the gospel message for you. And the leaders of the church had nothing to add to what I was preaching. By the way, their reputation as great leaders made no difference to me, for God has no favorites. Instead, they saw that God had given me the responsibility of preaching the gospel to the Gentiles, just as he had given Peter the responsibility of preaching to the Jews. For the same God who worked through Peter as the apostle to the Jews also worked through me as the apostle to the Gentiles. In fact, James, Peter, and John, who were known as pillars of the church, recognized the gift God had given me, and they accepted Barnabas and me as their co-workers. They encouraged us to keep preaching to the Gentiles while they continued their work with the Jews. Their only suggestion was that we keep on helping the poor, which I've always been eager to do." Paul went to Jerusalem and met with the leadership in response to direct revelation. God himself told Paul to make that journey and meet with those men. And then he met privately with the leadership. That means they got together where they could have private, open, frank conversations and discussions. Paul had his message evaluated, checked, and strengthened. He said, I want to make sure I wasn't doing anything wrong. I want to make sure I wasn't running in vain. And they listened to him, and they evaluated what he had to say, and they checked it for its scriptural accuracy, and they strengthened his leadership and ministry and gave him a shot of confidence that he could not have gotten any other way. Then some false leaders came in and they demanded, hey, we got to get Titus circumcised. The real leaders did not make that demand. They were able to prove the validity of the gospel to the Gentiles through the living example of Titus. And then Paul says they encouraged us to continue, recognizing that God gave me a ministry to the Gentiles just as God had given Peter a ministry to the Jews. They recognized, they blessed, and affirmed Paul's ministry. And you cannot have that if you're all by yourself. The recognition, affirmation, and approval and encouragement of others. And that's why it's so very important that Christians meet together so that we can affirm one another, strengthen one another, encourage one another. If necessary, gently correct and guide one another. And then they said, oh, by the way, keep helping the poor. And Paul says, I've been doing that, and I'm going to keep doing that. In fact, one of the keynotes of a true Christian gathering is a recognition of the need to care for and help the poor. Every church ought to be involved in some form of helping the poor. We are God's people. We need to get together. We need to affirm and encourage and strengthen one another. May God use you this week to meet with others and encourage and affirm. God bless you.